The future of knowledge in the public. Student protests on college campuses have led to calls for increased support of students of color, but one particular request became a matter of national policy that led to a threat to the Library of Congress's budget in the summer of 2016. In February 2014, a coalition of students at Dartmouth College put forward the Plan for Dartmouth Freedom Budget, Items for Transformative Justice at Dartmouth, the Freedom Plan, which include a line item to ban the use of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, wetback, and any racially charged term on the Dartmouth-sanctioned programming materials and locations. The plan also demanded that the library search catalog system shall use undocumented instead of illegal in reference to immigrants. Lisa Peet, reporting for Library Journal, noted. The replacement of the subject reading was the culmination of a 2-year grassroots process that began when Melissa Padilla, class of 2016, first noticed what she felt were inappropriate search terms while researching a paper on undocumented students at Dartmouth Baker Berry Library in 2013. While working with Research and Instruction Services, librarian Jill Barron, Padilla told LJ Library Journal she realized that nearly every article or book she looked at was categorized with the subject heading Illegal Aliens. The Dartmouth College librarians became deeply engaged in petitioning the Library of Congress. According to Pete, Barron, DeSantis, and Research and Instruction Services librarian Amy Witzel proposed that the students gather documentation to prove that illegal aliens is not a preferred term and to find evidence that better terms such as undocumented immigrant, which was their initial suggestion for a replacement, were in common use. At that point, news organizations such as the Associated Press, USA Today, ABC, the Chicago Tribune, and the LA Times had already committed not to use the term illegal to describe an individual. Though unsuccessful in 2015, the librarians, Professor Tina Gross at St. Cloud, the librarian's case to the Library of Congress had gained traction, and the librarian and Professor Tina Gross at St. Cloud State University began organizing caucuses and committees in the American Libraries Association, including the Subject Analysis Committee, Social Responsibility Roundtable, and Reforma, which advocates for library services for Latinos and those who speak Spanish. Social media campaigns ensued, organized under the Twitter hashtags Drop the Word and No Human Being is Illegal. By March 29, 2016, Dartmouth College's student-led organization, the Coalition for Immigration Reform, Equality, Co-Fired, and Dreamers, announced in a press release that after a 2-year battle in partnership with campus librarians and the American Libraries Association, the Library of Congress will replace the term illegal aliens with non-citizens and unauthorized immigrants in its subject heading. Illegal Alien Revisited. The struggle over reclassifying undocumented immigrants was part of a long history of naming members of society as problem people. In many ways, this effort to eliminate illegal alien was similar to the ways that Jewish people were once classified by the Library of Congress as the Jewish question, later to be reclassified in 1984 as quote-unquote Jews, and Asian Americans were once classified as the quote-unquote yellow peril. Control over identity is political and often a matter of public policy. Almost as soon as the successful change was approved, House Republicans introduced H.R. 4926 on April 13, 2016, also known as the quote-unquote Stop Being Partisan Policy at the Library of Congress Act, sponsored by Rep. Diane Black, RTN. In essence, the bill threatened the library's budget, and Black suggested that the effort to change the Library of Congress subject headings, LCSH, was a matter of caving to the whims of left-wing special interests and attempting to mask the grave threat that illegal immigration posed to our economy, our national security, and our sovereignty. The battle over how people are conceptualized and represented is ongoing and extends beyond the boundaries of institutions such as the Library of Congress or corporations such as Alphabet, which owns and manages Google Search. Jonathan Ferner, a professor of information studies at UCLA, suggests that information institutions and systems, which I argue extend from state-supported organizations such as the Library of Congress to the Internet, are participating in legitimizing the ideology of dominant groups to the detriment of people of color. His case study of the Dewey Decimal Classification (DDC) system, for example, underscores the problematic conceptualizations of race and culture and efforts to quote-unquote deracialize the library and classification schemes. Ferner offers several strategies for thinking about how to address these issues using critical race theory as the guiding theoretical and methodological model. I believe these strategies are of great value to thinking about the information studies issues at hand in this research. Admission on the part of designers that bias in classification schemes exists, and indeed is an inevitable result of the ways in which they are currently structured. Recognition that adherence to a policy of neutrality will contribute little to eradication of that bias, and indeed can only extend its life, and construction, collection, and analysis of narrative expressions of the feelings, thoughts, and beliefs of classification scheme users who identify with particular racially defined populations. While the web indexing process is not the same as classification systems such as DDC, the application of the theoretical model is still valid for thinking about conceptualizing algorithms and indexing models that could actively intervene in the default normativity of racism and sexism in information resource. Problems in classifying people. The idea of classification as a social construct is not new. A.C. Foskett suggests that classificationists are the products of their times. In the work of Nicholas Hudson of the University of British Columbia on the origins of racial classification in the 18th century, he suggests that during the Enlightenment, Europeans began to construct quote-unquote imagined communities, citing Benedict Anderson's term. He says this mental image of a community of like-minded individuals sharing a general will or a common national soul was made possible by the expansion of print culture, which stabilized national language and gave wide access to the literary tradition. Classification systems, then, are part of the scientific approach to understanding people and societies, and they hold the power biases of those who are able to propagate such systems. The invention of print culture accelerated the need for information classification schemes, which were often developing in tandem with the expansion of popular, scholarly, and scientific works. Trace of previous works defining the scientific classification of native peoples as quote-unquote savage, and claims about Europeans as the quote-unquote superior race based on prior notions of people and nations began to emerge and be codified in the 18th century. Extensive histories have been written of how racial classification emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries in North America as a paradigm of differentiation that would support the exclusion of Native and African people from social and political life. By the 19th century, the processes involved in the development of racial classification marked biological rather than cultural difference and were codified to legally deny rights to property ownership and citizenship. These historical practices undergird the formation of racial classification, which is both assumed and legitimized in classification systems. Without an examination of the historical force at play in the development of such system, the replication and codification of people of African descent into the margins goes uncritically examined. This process can be seen in knowledge organizations that both privileges and subordinates through information hierarchies, such as catalogs and classification systems. The field of library science has been implicated in the organization of people and critiqued for practices that perpetuate power by privileging some sectors of society at the expense of others. Traditional library and information science (LIS) organization systems such as subject cataloging and classification are an important part of understanding the landscape of how information science has inherited and continues biased practices in current system designs, especially on the web.